Part 47. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 461. Chapter 461. The third prince's concubine came uninvited. Compared to Fan Qinjiao's rage, Bailey Fengming was as calm as water. It seems that the person being calculated, or even about to be replaced, is not him at all. Seeing that Fan Qinjiao was really angry, he held her hand and said with a chuckle, "When I chose to brave the rapids, I wanted to see how many things could be brought to the surface by this huge wave. It should be a good thing if someone shows up now, but it would make people panic if no one shows up." Fan Qinjiao naturally understood what Bailey Fengming meant. The battle for the throne has reached a feverish stage. Taking action at this time is not just a step in the opposite direction, but a fatal move. However, if people's hearts are separated from each other, if they really want to be a cat or a dog, they have to let them see the flesh to know. As long as all the enemies hidden in the dark become open enemies, Bailey Fengming's plan will be a sure win. But when he thought of Bailey Rong's sinister tricks, Fan Qinjiao wished he could just slap him to death on the beach. Given the suspicious and greedy nature of that man in the palace, I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for much longer. People in their twilight years are often greedy for life, fearful of death, greedy for money and power, and it is difficult to hold a mind tightly in their hands, and then how could the so-called bandits take advantage? Bailey Fengming pushed away her clenched fingers with the back of his hand and held them tightly with his. It just so happened that during this period, I have been struggling with what identity the men of the Hua family should show up. Maybe I should thank you this time. Brother Sanhuang is the one. Fan Qinjiao's mind once again came up with the word bandit. The current bandits were made up by Bailey Rongs in order to replace Bailey Fengming's position in the emperor's heart. But if his uncles were really allowed to occupy the mountain as bandits, they would not only be able to catch Bailey Rongs off guard, but they could also take the emperor's minds as your own openly. In this way, you get the best of both worlds. I will write to my uncles when I get back. Don't be in a hurry. The name of mountain bandit is not good after all. Bailey Fengming frowned slightly. Fortunately, the momentum has just begun. After the father hesitates, he will send the 3 emperor brothers to Huaishang. Some more are needed. Time, if there was a better way, he would not want a man from the Hua family to bear the title of bandit. Fan Qinjiao said, the Hua family never cares about those false reputations. Uncles don't have good reputations, and very few people have seen them. Even if they are really bandits, it doesn't matter. Unless the emperor personally leads the troops to suppress the bandits, even Bailey Rongs will have a hard time recognizing his uncles. Their faces. But does the emperor really dare to go? Of course not. The more selfish a person is, the more he cherishes his life. Bailey Rongs wants to take off on Bailey Fengming, but it also depends on whether his own wings are strong enough. Now Bailey Fengming is still claiming to be recuperating in the palace, and he is so arrogant. If he is really allowed to fly in Hawaii with the sweetness gained, I am afraid that I will be able to do things like murdering Bailey Fengming in the future. No matter what, Huaishang's wings must be broken in half this time. Seeing that the palace was in front of him, Bailey Fengming had already put on his bamboo hat, and Fan Qinjiao also got up and returned to the carriage. Unexpectedly, the carriage drove smoothly all the way to the palace. Then when it came out, and the guards did not even check. Fan Qinjiao was sitting in the carriage. He stretched out his hand to lift the curtain and looked out. He saw that there were many fewer guards who usually patrolled the village. When the carriage stopped at the entrance of the palace, Fan Qinjiao saw from a distance that many guards were surrounding the courtyard of a certain palace. Looking in the direction, Fan Qinjiao always felt that something was wrong. Bailey Fengming seemed to have noticed something. Taking advantage of the guards being lazy, he took Fan Qinjiao around the alley in the palace. Before walking a few steps, he saw Lin Yi, who had been waiting not far away. As soon as Lin Yi saw Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao, he hurriedly reported, "Your Highness, the Crown Princess, the third princess and many guards surrounded His Highness's palace. They said they heard the news and someone wanted to he planned to murder the prince and came here specifically to visit His Highness." Fan Kinjao almost laughed when he heard this. Even if someone really wants to kill the prince, what can a princess do? I'm afraid even the recharge number is not enough to see what's going on with those guards. Even if the third princess wanted to visit His Highness, there was no need to go to such trouble to find so many guards to make up the number. My subordinates have made inquiries secretly. It seems that the third prince and his concubine spent a lot of money to hire these guards. Fan Kinjao frowned slightly. Spend money. Bailey Fengming was not surprised. The palace is not as good as the imperial palace, and the servants raised here are also very undisciplined. They only recognize money and not their masters. In other words, whoever takes the silver is the master. Fan Kinjao's frown relaxed. To put it bluntly, these guards were recruited by the third prince and concubine to support him. It is really difficult for the third prince and concubine. I am afraid that the price of these guards will not be too cheap. The princess doesn't know, these guards calculate money by the hour, so the third prince's concubine found so many guards at once, which really surprised Lin Yi. Fan Kinjao expressed his understanding. The third prince's concubine is stupid and has a lot of money, so it is normal for her to do this kind of money-burning and courageous behavior. If the Pan family had not had some money, concubine Yu would not have nodded and made Pan Yulo the third prince's concubine. Following Lin Yi walking towards the palace where Bailey Fengming lived, Fan Kinjao asked softly, "Where is she now?" Lin Yi whispered. The fourth lady of the Hua family heard the news and hurried over. Now she is pretending to be the crown princess and messing around with the third prince's concubine in the outer hall. Fan Kinjao did not expect that Mu Yan would come up to him in disguise. However, Mu Yan's temperament has always been tolerant, and I'm afraid she won't be able to withstand it for too long. Fan Kinjao and Bailey Fengming followed Lin Yi into the backyard of the palace and walked in through the back door that Lin Yi had left long ago. The first person to enter was the innermost back room. I saw a person lying on the bed that should have been empty. As if he heard the footsteps, the man suddenly opened the quilt. When he saw Fan Kinjao and Bailey Fengming both entering the door, he didn't know whether he was excited or something, but he sat up from the bed. Such a sudden move made Lin Yi feel embarrassed. Fan Kinjao was stunned when he saw Zhou Renjian's face as black as the bottom of a pot. I think it was the same as Mu Yan. When he knew that the third prince's concubine was coming, he was afraid that someone would notice something, so he came over temporarily to help lift the body. Seeing His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, Zhou Renjian quickly threw off his quilt and got to the ground, and was about to salute. Bailey Fengming grabbed his arm, shook his head gently, and took off his clothes. Zhou Renjian also knew that now was not the time to pay attention to etiquette, so he hurriedly turned around and rearranged the bed where he had slept, and then helped Bailey Fengming, who had taken off his clothes, to lie down on the bed. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 462. Chapter 462, A Ghost in Broad Daylight. From beginning to end, Zhou Renjian was still extremely respectful to His Royal Highness. But when facing Fan Kinjao, his face was so dark that even his facial features could hardly be seen clearly. If this goblin hadn't hooked up with the crown prince to go out for the festival, how could he have been caught off guard by the third prince's concubine? Fortunately, it was not too late. If something really happened, he would be the first to execute the goblin named Fan on the spot. How do you expect him to look good? He has a bad face. Fan Kinjao had no time to talk to Zhou Renjian now, so he took out his change of clothes from the cabinet and went to the inner hall. There is only a wall between the outer hall and the inner hall, and the arch is blocked by a screen. So when Fan Kinjao changed his clothes, he could clearly hear the conversation between the third princess and Mu Yan. At this time, Pan Yulu, the third prince's concubine, was sitting on the Grand Master's chair, holding a teacup in her hand, looking at Fan Kinjao, who was quite embarrassed in front of her, feeling not only suspicious but also proud. Originally, when she came here today, she was already prepared for a war of words with Fan Kinjao. Unexpectedly, Fan Kinjao didn't know what happened today, but he actually gave in to her in every aspect. But the more this happened, the more suspicious Pan Yulu became. Could it be that the suspicion in the letter was well founded and that the crown prince was already awake and was simply pretending to be ill? Thinking of this, Pan Yulu looked at Mu Yan with sharper eyes. After talking for so long, why is the crown princess still sitting here unmoved? I am also worried about His Highness, so I am helping my family. The third highness came to visit us. Now that the crown princess is obstructing us like this, is it because she looks down on our third highness, or is she doing something shameful? Mu Yan was not a person who was good at arguing, but now faced with the aggressiveness of the third prince and concubine, his face became even paler. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has not woken up yet. It is really inconvenient for him to visit. Please ask the third prince and concubine for your understanding. Mu Yan tensed up and sat stiffly on the chair, with the handkerchief in her hand clenched tightly. Pan Yulu sneered and snorted, I don't dare to take the crown princess's words of consideration seriously, but this time I came to visit His Highness the Crown Prince on the instructions of my third highness. Now that the crown princess is obstructing her like this, if our family His Highness blamed it, but he didn't know if the crown princess could bear it. Mu Yan was sitting here, thinking about helping the third sister. Now listening to the third prince's words, she was biting her lips anxiously. If it was really because of her that the third sister was charged with something, then she would it's damned. Seeing Mu Yan's face turning pale, Pan Yulu became less defensive about Fan Kinjao. Seeing that Mu Yan seemed to have no room to fight back, she simply took a step forward and rushed to the inner palace. Seeing that Mu Yan could not sit still, he suddenly stood up. He probably stood up too fiercely, which startled Pan Yulu, who was about to rush forward. Is the crown princess still planning to take action against me? Pan Yulu said it was true that she looked down on Fan Kinjao, but she was also lying when she said she was not afraid of Fan Kinjao, thinking that Fan Kinjao had torn Zhang Yulan's face off in person a few days ago. How could she not feel guilty when she was being pressed to the ground? Mu Yan didn't know why she stood up. She was forced into a dilemma by the third prince and concubine. From the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw a familiar figure flash across the screen. Almost instantly, Mu Yan's heart calmed down. The panic in her heart disappeared, and Mu Yan began to speak more appropriately. Third princess, please wait a moment, I suddenly remembered something important. Of course, Pan Yulu would not let Mu Yan leave so easily, but Mu Yan didn't give her a chance to speak at all. After finishing what she said, she walked towards the back of the screen. Pan Yulu was furious but could do nothing. Even if it was clear that she had a head start on Fan Kinjao today, she would not dare to fight him. However, looking at Mu Yan's back that seemed to be running away, the anger in Pan Yulu's heart gradually subsided. Guessing that the prince was really in trouble, Fan Kinjao knew in his heart that he was about to lose his backer, so he couldn't even stand up. It was quite unlucky to think about it. Mu Yan didn't know the little juju in the third prince's heart. He hurried around the screen. The moment he saw the familiar figure, tears flowed down uncontrollably. Third sister. Fan Kinjao held Mu Yan's trembling hand and comforted her in a low voice. Why are you crying? You did such a good job. Why should third sister comfort me? If third sister hadn't come back in time, I'm afraid that the third prince's concubine would have rushed into the dormitory now. It was useless for me to stop the third prince's concubine. Mu Yan thought that as long as she pretended to be, if she looks like the third sister, she will completely become the third sister, but in the end she will still be her. It turns out that the blessing of status also depends on whether you can control it. No wonder Zhou Renjian doesn't like her. If it were her, She wouldn't like such an incompetent herself. Fan Kinjao took out his handkerchief and gently wiped the corners of Mu Yan's eyes. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid the third prince's concubine would have rushed into the dormitory. I said you did well, and what you did is good. Mu Yan, you remember, you are who you are, you don't have to try to be someone else, and others can't be you. Mu Yan looked at the third sister in front of her with tearful eyes, and nodded seriously after a long while. But something happened to His Royal Highness. Princess, don't panic, I'll go in and help. Pan Yulu in the outer hall had no intention of waiting for anything, but now that Mu Yan never came back, she naturally had the idea to rush into the bedroom. Reasons. Hearing this, Fan Kinjao put the handkerchief in Mu Yan's hand and pushed Mu Yan towards the inner palace. At the same time, Pan Yulu bypassed the screen. When their eyes met, Pan Yulu raised her lips first and smiled. The crown princess is really interested. She actually left me outside alone and ran in to change my clothes. Isn't this the crown princess's way of hospitality? Fan Kinjao unhurriedly adjusted his clothes. I just stood up a little violently, and the tea spilled on my clothes. Even if the Miss Pan family picked up the title of the third prince's concubine, she is now a legitimate third princess. The third prince and concubine may not care, but I can't lose my etiquette. There is no need to alarm the third prince and concubine for such a trivial matter. Pan Yulu was shocked by such straightforward words. This is clearly saying that she wanted to be the crown princess but failed, and settled for the next best thing before becoming the third prince's concubine. Although this is a fact that everyone is well aware of, it is one thing to know it in the heart, but it is another thing for others to take it out and press it to the ground. Thinking about Fan Kinjao's pale face and helpless appearance just now. Let's look at Fan Kinjao's eyes now, and his whole body exuding murderous aura. Pan Yulu only thought that she had encountered a ghost in broad daylight. Otherwise, why are they obviously the same person, but they feel so different? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 463. Chapter 463. What happened? Fan Kinjao didn't have time to stand here and stare at Pan Yulu, so he walked out without saying a word. Pan Yulu gritted her teeth reluctantly and took a step forward to continue walking inside. Why is His Highness the Crown Prince so quiet? Speaking of which, I have been here for a while. Could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince has some physical discomfort? Since I have been here all the time, well, why don't you go and see it with the Crown Princess? Fan Kinjao stopped and stood in front of Pan Yulu. The prince is still in a coma, so he is quiet. I don't need to bother the third prince and princess with the matter of seeking medical consultation. After saying that, he held Pan Yulu's wrist. This time, Pan Yulu was dragged out of the screen. The pain in her wrist was too much for Pan Yulu. Struggling to shake off Fan Kinjao's grasp, Pan Yulu could no longer hold back the smile on her face. The crown princess really has a bad temper. I have already made it clear. I am here on behalf of our third highness when the crown princess is visiting His Highness. Are you really not afraid of His Highness being blamed for being so obstructive? Amidst Pan Yulu's roar, Fan Kinjao turned around and sat on the chair where Mu Yan had just been sitting. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said calmly, the third prince's concubine also said that she came to visit the prince on behalf of the third prince. In that case, that's all. Now that the crown prince is unconscious, it is even more important to recover from his injuries. If the third prince disturbs the crown prince's peace at this time, aren't he afraid that the queen and even the emperor will blame him? These words were basically what Pan Yulu pressed on Mu Yan just now. Now, after just a few words, Fan Kinjao returned it to her intact. Since she is the third prince's concubine, she will always bring the third prince out to talk about things. In this case, Fan Kinjao naturally has to kindly remind her not to forget that there is the Empress and the Emperor above the third prince. This time, it was really Pan Yulu's turn to turn pale. Looking at Fan Kinjao, who had already picked up the teacup and started drinking tea, Pan Yulu was so angry that she could hardly stand. Fan Kinjao had no intention of letting her go just like that, but since the third prince's concubine is here all the time, I can't let the third prince's concubine go back like this. The imperial doctor who is visiting the palace will come to take the pulse of His Highness in a while. If they say that His Highness the Crown Prince is in good health, it is not impossible for the third prince and concubine to go in and visit him. People can watch it, but they have to wait. As soon as he finished speaking, Fan Kinjao stood up and walked towards the bedroom inside. The imperial physician from the palace would come regularly every day to diagnose Bailey Fengming's pulse, and then send the daily pulse diagnosis results in a secret message to the palace in the main city for the emperor to review. Now that the emperor is so hesitant, Fan Kinjao is using a silver needle to control Bailey Fengming's pulse every day, causing the pulse that was already stable to fluctuate between good and bad. In total, the imperial physician who is visiting the palace will be arriving soon. Fan Kinjao naturally has no need to continue wasting time on Pan Yulu. Furthermore, didn't Lin Yi say that the guards collect money according to the hour? Since the third prince's concubine is so wealthy, Fan Kinjao naturally wants to give her the beauty of an adult. In the bedroom, Mu Yan and Zhou Renjian were quietly sent out by Lin Yi through the back door. When he came back, Lin Yi heard the conversation between the crown princess and the third prince. Thinking about the 20 guards outside, each of whom collects money according to the hour, Lin Yi feels sick just thinking about it. Princess, this is too cruel. It is heartbreaking to kill people. It was Bailey Fengming who was sitting on the bed and reading the scroll. When he heard Fan Kinjao's footsteps, he put down the scroll in his hand very cooperatively. Fan Kinjao's expression was not very good. Now all the princes and concubines have stayed in Zhuangzi in the palace. The relationship between the third prince concubine Pan Yulu and the eldest prince concubine Yan Hanbei has always been inseparable. If this matter was Pan Yulu doing this to please Bailey Rongs, it would be a shame. Came here with Yan Hanbei. But now Pan Yulu herself is the only one here, which proves that today's temptation was Bailey Rongs' fault. Thinking about the rumors of banditry among the people recently, Fan Kinjao still didn't understand. Basically, Bailey Rongs deliberately asked Pan Yulu to test whether Bailey Fengming was seriously ill. If it was true that Bailey Fengming was seriously ill, Bailey Rongs could confidently and boldly chew the bone on Huaishang, and then take the opportunity to kill Bailey Fengming. Li Fengming was completely erased from the emperor's heart, and then successfully replaced. As expected, it is not the most shameless, only more shameless. Considering Bailey Rongs' despicable and villainous tactics, calling him a scumbag is just a pretext. How is my pulse lately? Bailey Fengming, who was already lying on the bed with his clothes undressed, suddenly asked softly. Fan Kinjao came back to his senses and said truthfully, "It's been floating pulse for several days. Severely injured and comatose, floating pulse is the most common. It's just that the floating pulse is unpredictable. Because of this, everyone thinks that the prince's life or death is still uncertain." Bailey Fengming said, "Then it's better to count the pulse instead." Fan Kinjao was stunned. Bailey Fengming smiled and added, "People always have to pay some price for their stupidity." He retreated bravely, but he was not really a coward. Since the third emperor brother can do such a sinister thing, he will naturally retaliate in kind. This is only fair. Bailey Rongs asked his princess to come to test. Regardless of whether Pan Yulu's fanfare was Bailey Rongs' intention or not, Bailey Rongs had already torn off the last layer of skin between brothers. Bailey Rongs, it is reasonable for Fengming to want to use his strength to gain strength. But now Bailey Fengming is recuperating in the palace, which can be said to affect the whole body. If the emperor knew that the prince was critically ill, he would definitely have to make a choice. Bailey Fengming did this probably not just for Bailey wrongs. In the front hall, Pan Yula was worried to death. The palace guards in the courtyard are very Philistine and don't recognize anything except money. Originally, Pan Yula planned to give each of them an hour's worth of money, which would be enough no matter what. However, Fan Kinjao didn't say anything and asked her to wait here for news from the imperial doctor. If she leaves now, once the imperial doctor really says that the prince is fine and can go in for a visit, won't she miss the opportunity to inquire? But if she doesn't leave, what if the result is that she can't visit the prince? Pan Yula held the handkerchief and sat on the chair. Her heart was unable to rest at ease, neither if she left nor if she didn't leave. This feeling of internal and external anxiety was torturing her to death. Suddenly, there was a rush of footsteps in the yard. Pan Yula followed the sound and saw several imperial doctors hurriedly entering the door. Pan Yula didn't care about being arrogant and took the initiative to walk over. I've troubled several imperial doctors to work hard for His Highness the Crown Prince's health every day. I just don't know how His Highness the Crown Prince's health has improved. The meaning of the sentence is quite obvious. But at the moment, no imperial physician spoke back. These anxious doctors didn't even look at Pan Yula and walked towards Li Nei's bedroom. Pan Yula, who was ignored in the same place, seemed to taste something different no matter how stupid she was. It is true that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was seriously injured and in a coma, but several months have passed in a blink of an eye. Even if the imperial physician in the palace is not as knowledgeable as the imperial physician in the palace, there is no need to make such a fuss. But looking at their pale faces just now, Pan Yula was just thinking about it when she saw His Royal Highness Lin Yi coming from behind. This time, Pan Yula did not continue to be ignored. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince suddenly fell seriously ill. Now the Crown Princess and the imperial physician from the palace are working together in the inner hall to treat His Highness the Crown Prince. If the three princes and concubines have nothing else to do, they might as well go back to Zhuangzi first. Pan Yula, why did you suddenly become seriously ill? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 464. Chapter 464, You're all going to be scared to death, okay? Pan Yula's face turned blue, and her own heartbeat could be heard in her ears. The prince had been lying in the palace for several months. Although he never woke up, his health never deteriorated. Now she is seriously ill, and it happened to be just when she came with her guards. If this matter spreads, wouldn't she become an accomplice in causing the prince to become seriously ill? Thinking of this, Pan Yula's originally green face instantly turned pale, her body shook so hard that she almost fell to the ground. When Lin Yi saw this, he couldn't stop laughing in his heart. How dare you challenge the authority of the crown princess with this little ability? What is it if it's not that we have lived enough? It just so happens that His Highness is still a maniac about doting on his wife, and today's affairs will inevitably be supported by the crown princess, so don't feel aggrieved by the third prince's concubine. If you really think about it, the third prince who was implicated by your recklessness and ignorance in the main city is truly pitiable. How did Pan Yula know about Xiaojiju in Lin Yi's heart? She knew that if this matter spread, she would be speechless and couldn't explain clearly. She almost gritted her teeth and forced herself to hold on, and hurried towards the inner palace. Impossible, why is it that someone who is fine can be seriously ill? Fan Kinjao must have done some shady trick, otherwise why would it be such a coincidence? With the last glimmer of hope, Pan Yulu rushed into the inner bedroom. The bedroom was filled with the bitterness of the concoction. Several imperial doctors were gathered around the bed, each checking the pulse of His Royal Highness. Fan Kinjao, who was standing among them, saw Pan Yulu at the door with his peripheral vision, and quietly turned his body sideways. Naturally, Pan Yulu saw the bloodless face and closed eyes of His Highness the Crown Prince on the bed. Fan Kinjao looked at Panula, who was crumbling at the door, and didn't feel any pity. From the day Panula married Bailey Rongs, she had completely drawn a clear line with her. Since you want to help Bailey Rongs find out information, you must be prepared to accept retribution. Thinking like this, Fan Kinjao turned to look at the several imperial doctors on the side. I just checked the pulse of His Highness the Crown Prince, and it seems that there are signs of several pulses. I wonder what the imperial doctors think. The pulse is rapid, 8 times in one breath, and it is really counting pulses. His Royal Highness the Prince has been suffering from yin deficiency for a long time, and the deficiency and heat are internally generated now. I am afraid that he has been disturbed by external noises, which has accelerated the flow of blood. With such yin and yang being weak, and ups and downs of deficiency and excess, I am afraid. I'd like to trouble the Crown Princess to prescribe medicine for the Crown Prince. First, the ministers need to report the matter to the Emperor in a timely manner. The imperial doctors in the palace are all experienced and erratic. The prince's current situation is obviously not good, so naturally they will not take the initiative to prescribe medicine, so even if the person is really gone, it will not have much to do with them. Fan Kinjao had naturally figured out the thoughts of these imperial doctors. He nodded helplessly, but when he turned around, he quietly pulled out the silver needle inserted in Bailey Fengming's chest and hid it in his sleeve. The people in the dormitory are still busy. Fan Kinjao was prescribing medicine on the side, and several imperial doctors were discussing how to report the matter to the emperor. Pan Yulu, who had been standing at the door, was dumbfounded and almost scared to death. Especially after hearing that the imperial doctors said that they would send a message to the Emperor Fei Ji tonight, his eyes turned black and he fell heavily to the ground. The third prince's concubine fainted. He was so frightened that he fainted. But even if Panula was unconscious, she could not stop the urgent letter from the palace from being delivered to the imperial city. In the third prince's residence, it was Bailey Rongs who was quietly discussing matters with a group of staff. After hearing the news from the spies, he stood still and his handsome face was as dark as the late night outside. Obviously the gas is being given to the limit. The staff next to him were also speechless. Let's just visit, what are we doing with so many guards? His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is already in weak health, but now he is blocked in the palace by such a group of door gods. Not to mention being seriously ill, it is understandable that he would be killed directly. Bailey Rongs always knew that Panula had no brain, but he never expected that he would be so stupid. Just go and find out by yourself. Is it because she brought so many guards so that no one will know that she went to find out? However, no matter how angry Bailey Rongs was, he knew that now was not the time to complain. The prince was seriously ill and an urgent letter from the imperial doctor had been sent to the palace. Even if his father did not pay attention to the prince, he was his own flesh and blood. The emperor must not sit idly by and ignore this. Sure enough, Bailey Rongs was discussing countermeasures here, and over there, someone from the palace came to invite Bailey Rongs into the palace. In the Longjian Hall, Emperor Yongchang, who was wearing only his underwear, was sitting on the dragon couch half covered with a quilt. The little who was changing clothes next to him had sore hands, and Emperor Yongchang suddenly didn't see him. Under the swaying candlelight, Emperor Yongchang looked at a certain place in a daze, a rare dejection. After a long while, Emperor Yongchang murmured, "Tell me, why is he so impatient?" This question was naturally asked by Bai Tu, who was standing beside him. Bai Tu thought to himself that the third prince would even let the third prince's concubine break into the prince's palace to find out whether the prince was seriously ill. This was not a matter of urgency. It was simply a matter of not looking too ugly. But that's what I think, but I can't say that. After waving his hand and driving the other young eunuchs out, Bai Tu said softly, "The third prince is probably worried about the health of His Highness the Crown Prince, which is why he did such an urgent thing. I guess the third prince also didn't expect the third prince's concubine to do something. It's so inappropriate that he led a group of guards into the prince's bedroom. These words can be said to be exactly what Emperor Yongchang wanted. A prince's concubine can even do things like leading the guards to show off her power. What if she doesn't imitate her? Who the third prince's concubine can imitate is naturally the third prince who is closest to her. It is true that the third prince has been the favorite of Emperor Yongchang since childhood, but his eagerness for quick success and instant gain still disgusts Emperor Yongchang. Today, the third prince's concubine can rush into the prince's palace with his guards, so when he is critically ill in the future, will the third prince also bring his guards and force him to die? Outside the door, the little eunuch's announcement suddenly came, "Your Majesty, the third prince has arrived." Emperor Yongchang waved his hand impatiently, "Let him kneel in front of the palace. No one is allowed to come to me to plead for mercy." Baitu looked at the emperor's irritable look and knew that his words had been effective, so he remained silent and said nothing more. He only hoped that His Highness the Crown Prince could escape this disaster safely. The news that the third prince was forced to kneel overnight quickly spread to every corner of the palace. When concubine Yu heard this, she almost went crazy on the spot. She never thought she would raise a son, so why is she so stupid? What is the critically ill prince? That's flammable and explosive. Others were afraid of being contaminated and couldn't even hide. Why did her stupid son just go up to the top? The most annoying thing is that Minato still doesn't understand. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 465. Chapter 465, Soft persimmons can also fill your teeth. Concubine Yu was of course not one to sit still and wait for death. She immediately asked the people in the palace to light all the candles. She even had someone prepare a basin of cold water with ice, and she jumped in while holding her nose. At midnight, the lights of Yueyu Palace were brightly lit, illuminating half of the palace. Not long after, the news that concubine Yu fell ill also spread. Empress Zhen 11, who was also alarmed and stood up, was sitting in Fenji Palace with a sullen face when she saw Lily walking over in a hurry. "Empress, there has just been news from Yueyu Palace that concubine Yu is ill." Lily gently covered the queen's shoulders with the cloak in her hand, and carefully observed the queen's face. Empress Zhen 11 didn't say anything, but directly smashed the hand-warming stove on the ground. For a time, fire burst out. Lily was so frightened that she quickly raised the teapot on the table and extinguished the sparks on the ground. "Queen, please calm down. You are the master of the harem. You must not mess up your position and let others take advantage of it." Queen Zhengzi looked at the extinguished sparks coldly, the fire in her dark eyes still crackling. "Just because I am the master of the harem, I have to watch my husband spend all day in the presence of other women. I linger on the bed, just because I am the queen of the world, so I have to take the overall situation into consideration in everything." Over the years, she has come step by step, and every step has gone through tens of millions of calculations. Her forbearance, her viciousness, her restraint, everything about her. She will all be given to those who keep an eye on her all day long. Queen Zhen 11 suddenly smiled, her smile as bright as a flower but as cold as a bone. She stole the emperor's favor, and even tried every means to let her son take away the emperor's favor. "I can turn a blind eye to these things in one eye. As long as my son is the prince, her son will always be the one who is stepped on. But now her son actually wants to plot my son's life. If I can endure it any longer, I will be the one who gets stepped on." What a queen! Lily was frightened by the queen's cruel look. No matter how provocative the concubines in the harem are in recent years, the queen just laughs them off. Now the third prince may have really touched the queen's vagina. A white figure suddenly squeezed in through the door of the bedroom. Empress Zhen 11 looked at the hairy one whose stomach trembled as she took every step, and was stunned for a few moments. Lily saw it and said quickly, "Isn't this the Chaiwu who is raised by His Highness the Prince? But how could I remember that Chaiwu is all black, but this one is. It's white and so fat. Ta Shui seemed to have noticed Lily's discrimination. She proudly raised her big snow-white head and walked condescendingly past Lily. Lily. Is it really okay for a pet to have such an arrogant temperament? Empress Zhen 11 thought of Ta Shui. She had seen two little things when the prince brought them back from outside, but they were too small at that time. One was black and the other was white, like two of string. Later, Queen Zhengzi could always see Chaiwu, but she never saw Taxu again. Empress Zhen 11 thought about it when she saw Ta Shui sitting in front of her, opened her mouth, and a note covered in saliva was spat on Empress Zhen 11's lap. Empress Zhengzi didn't care about what she disliked and hurriedly picked up the note and opened it. As the familiar fonts came into view, her burning heart finally returned to its original calmness. Don't think about it. Those two simple words are enough to describe Bailey Fengming's piece. These two words really saved Queen Zhengzi's life. After Queen Zhen 11 calmed down, her thoughts gradually became clearer. It is reckless to make the whole city aware of his serious illness in this way, but it is not inappropriate. With the temperament of Fengming and Xiao Qinjiao, I am afraid that everything will be arranged. Seeing that the queen's expression finally softened, Bai he spoke again, the safety of your highness is the most important thing. The queen must not make her body angry. Now that the emperor is angry, even if concubine Yu is angry again, no matter how hard it is, the third prince's punishment is indispensable. The emperor is indeed angry now, but how long can he stay angry with his favoritism towards Yu Palace? Queen Zhen 11 smiled coldly. Concubine Yu was not a fool either. If the cruel trick didn't work, he will also think of other ways to make the emperor calm down. Lily thought about the tricks concubine Yu had used to win favor over the years, and fell silent. Go and bring Ji Hongliao to the palace, and accompany me to the Yu palace. Queen Zhengzi threw the note in her hand into the candlestick. Even though she knew that the emperor would have news sooner or later, she still had to deal with this. Concubine Yu added it. It's time to let concubine Yu know that soft persimmons don't clap their teeth, but they can also jam them. Ji Hongliao was not in charge today, but after hearing the queen's summons, Ji Hongliao got up in a hurry and followed the summoned palace attendants into the palace. After all, she is the old woman of her apprentice, so she still has to give her some face. As soon as Empress Zhen 11 and Ji Hongliao entered Yu Palace, they heard concubine Yu's hoarse wails. The palace people in the palace of Yu saw that they were kneeling on the ground and invited the queen's mother, and the atmosphere did not dare to come out. Concubine Yu listened to the noise outside and thought it was the emperor who had arrived, but when she looked expectantly towards the door, she was greeted by Queen Zhen 11 stepping in. Looking at Queen Zhen 11, the disappointment in concubine Yu's eyes was self-evident. Even without even looking at Queen Zhen 11, concubine Yu simply turned her back. Looking at this situation, Grandma Ying quickly stepped forward to pay her respects to the queen. I would also like to ask the queen to atone for her sins. Your Majesty is in ill health, and she really does not have the strength to pay her respects to the queen. Not only did Empress Zhen 11 not take the opportunity to punish her, but she showed an expression even more worried than Aunt Ying's. She looked at concubine Yu, who was on the bed with her back turned to her, and said with emotion, I heard that the third prince was punished by the emperor to kneel in front of the palace. Although I don't know the reason, I also know that Sister Yu must be worried about this. I invited the judge of Ji Yuan into the palace in advance just for emergencies. I never thought that it would come in handy. Concubine Yu froze. She pretended to be sick just because she knew Ji Hongliao was not on duty today. Even if other imperial doctors knew that she was obviously pretending to be ill, they would not expose it, but Ji Hongliao would not do it at all. Empress Zhen 11 looked at concubine Yu's stiff back, feeling very amused. Is it strange that I can invite my daughter-in-law's master to come over? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 466. Chapter 466 Concubine Panda and Concubine Zhongshu's Support. Empress Zhen 11 had already moved Ji Hongliao out, but Concubine Yu extended her hand even though she was reluctant. Fortunately, Concubine Yu was prepared in advance and did not panic. Just looking at the hypocritical look of Queen Zhen 11, Concubine Yu couldn't let it go. I heard the news from the palace that the prince's condition has worsened. It seems that the third prince is reckless. Even if he is worried about his highness, you shouldn't be so reckless, knowing that the prince is weak but still caring about brotherhood. To put it bluntly, your son is in poor health, and even if he dies, it won't be the fault of my son. Empress Zhen 11 squeezed the handkerchief tightly and said calmly, I understand the third prince's intention, but I'm afraid that the emperor doesn't understand. Otherwise, the third prince wouldn't have to kneel in front of the palace now. If something happens to my son, your son won't be able to run away, so you have nothing to complain about. Concubine Yu's expression froze, and she carefully looked at the queen's face, and saw that it was really white with blue in it, and her brows were furrowed, showing concern and sadness that were visible to the naked eye. She really started to feel uneasy. Judging from the queen's face, the prince didn't seem to be pretending to be ill. But if the prince really died like this because of this matter, even if the emperor continues to favor the third prince, will he really not have any doubts at all? No, given the emperor's suspicious temperament, he would naturally be suspicious. In this case, the emperor will be on guard against the third prince. Then gradually, will the third prince also become the second prince to be monitored by the emperor? Empress Zhen 11 looked at Concubine Yu's secretly guessing look as if she was seeing the king of hell, and felt relieved not to mention hiding. You can stab me with a meat cleaver, and I can chop you with a boning knife. The verbal battle between the queen and Concubine Yu seemed to be flashing with swords and lights in Yu Palace. In the fight between gods and immortals, even Grandma Ying and Lily could only stand aside and pretend to be dead, not to mention the palace people in the yard. Just listening to those words of you coming and going, you will be scared. How about dying? Not long after, Ji Hongliao stood up, looked at Concubine Yu as if admonishing, and said, although it has passed the Dragon Boat Festival, there will inevitably be cool breezes at night. Concubine Yu should have a temperate temperament even if she is hot. You can no longer take ice water, just take a cold bath. Concubine Yu. If this Ji Hongliao hadn't been someone close to the emperor, she guaranteed that he wouldn't survive tomorrow. Ji Hongliao told the truth in front of the emperor, otherwise the emperor would not have kept Ji Hongliao by his side for so many years. She knew that Concubine Yu was deliberately pretending to be ill, and she knew that Ji Hongliao would tell the truth. I heard that Concubine Yu was ill, so she came here to take care of her. I begged the queen to be lenient. A discordant voice suddenly sounded in the yard. The voice was harsh, as if it was mixed with tears, for fear that others would not know how Queen Zhen 11 made it difficult for Concubine Yu in Yu Palace, and even blocked things that should be done like serving patients. Even if Queen Zhen 11 doesn't have to look, she can tell who is coming just by listening to the voice. Isn't she the concubine panda who wants to be the prince's aunt? Now that my niece is married to the third prince, I have to rush to support Concubine Yu at this time. Concubine Yu felt happy when she heard Concubine Panda's voice. Her words alone are not trustworthy, but if Concubine Panda makes a big deal out of this matter, and the queen takes advantage of her illness to put pressure on her, it will soon become known throughout the city. Even if the queen insists that she is pretending to be ill, she will not be able to get away with it. The fact that the queen took the opportunity to oppress her. Concubine Panda heard that the queen had arrived at Yu Palace, so she naturally came to intervene. Now that her niece has boarded the third prince's ship, even if she hides it, she is not the same person as the empress. She might as well take the opportunity to express her position, and at least she can gain a good reputation in front of concubine Yu. Having made up her mind, concubine Panda took a deep breath and walked into the palace with red eyes. After marrying her niece to the third prince, concubine Panda became even closer to Yu Palace. Another voice that sounded like a smile but not a smile sounded behind concubine Panda. Concubine Panda stopped and turned around, and saw concubine Jiangshu, the mother of the eighth prince, entering the courtyard with the support of the palace maid. What are concubine Jiangshu doing here at this time? Concubine Panda frowned. Since the two of them were of the same seniority, there was no need for those complicated etiquette and honorifics. Concubine Jiangshu smiled brightly. What concubine Panda is here to do is what I am here to do. For such a simple truth, concubine Panda still needs to ask me. When a noble concubine is sick, it is an unwritten rule in the palace that lower-ranking concubines come to take care of her illness. If concubine Jiangshu is here to attend to concubine Yu, I advise you to go back. Didn't you see that I have to beg the empress to nod her head before she can enter? The implication is that you are the last to arrive, so don't waste time here. Well, getting out quickly is the wisest choice. What concubine Panda said is that since she didn't come in, how could she know the queen's attitude? Since concubine Jiangshu came today, how could she leave so easily? Concubine Panda did not dare to bear the charge of slandering the queen, and immediately said, I heard about it too. Concubine Jiangshu just laughed, but how come I heard that the queen was worried about concubine Yu's health, so she sent someone out of the palace to ask the judge from the Jiyuan to come and diagnose her pulse. Sure enough, you still need to see things to believe when you hear such things. Concubine Panda, you say yes. Concubine Panda Phi never expected that concubine Jiangshu would intervene out of thin air. She was so angry that her nose started to burn. But concubine Jiangshu was determined to fight with concubine Panda to the end, as if you were helping your concubine Yu and I would help my empress. In Yu Palace, concubine Yu really had a headache, chest tightness and cold limbs. Apparently for gas. How come she didn't know when concubine Jiangshu was standing on the queen's boat? Actually, Queen Zhengzi didn't know about this, but it's not too late to know now. Queen Zhen 11 felt happy when she saw concubine Yu being caught off guard. However, she pretended to be worried about the prince. Your Majesty was already worried about the prince's serious illness. If you continue to worry about Sister Yu's health, don't worry, Sister Yu, I will explain this matter to the emperor. Concubine Yu suppressed the anger in her heart and said, it's troublesome for the queen. Over the years, the emperor has always kept my concubine at the forefront of his heart, because he knows that I am not as tough as the queen. This statement clearly means that the queen is not as favored as she is. This is true. Queen Zhen 11 was not angry at all. She just said earnestly before leaving, speaking of which, this is not the first time that the third prince has been punished by the emperor. Sister Yu needs to relax and think openly. It is a fact that I am not favored, and it is also a fact that your son is punished to kneel. Now that you are pretending to be sick and I have exposed you, even if you ridicule me with foaming lips, it will not change the fact that your son has to continue to kneel in front of the palace. Concubine Yu. How come she hadn't found the queen so hateful before? Of course, concubine Yu would not admit that the queen was superior in skills. She would only think that concubine Panda was a waste. Otherwise, how could she be blocked by concubine Jiangshu? Pandi Fi. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 467. Chapter 467 Pandi Fi was struck by lightning. Empress Zhengzi walked out of Yu Palace with satisfaction. In the past, concubine Yu was able to live happily in the palace because she always adhered to the principle of keeping peace of mind. At that time, Fengming's health was not good and she couldn't see. She thought of using her kindness to concubine Yu in exchange for peace in Fengming's world. In the end, Fengming really had no chance of getting that chair. Concubine Yu might be able to see it. She had given Feng Ming a break when she had made concessions in the past. So in these years, Queen Zhengzi has been attacked from both sides in the harem and ridiculed. Which concubine in the palace looked at her seriously? Fortunately, Feng Ming is getting more and more mature now, and she has Xiao Qinjiao to help her. If she still adheres to the principle of keeping things peaceful, she will be holding back her two children. In the courtyard, concubine Panda, who was inexplicably put into a big pot by concubine Yu, looked very ugly. Empress Zhen 11 didn't have time to look at concubine Panda's slanderous face and her appearance of being struck by lightning. Instead, she said to concubine Jiangshu, the Ji Yuan judged that concubine Yu is not seriously ill and she only needs to cultivate herself. Concubine Jiangshu's intention is not the palace understands this on behalf of concubine Yu. It's getting late, so it's best for concubine Jiangshu not to disturb concubine Yu's rest. Concubine Jiangshu pushed the boat along the current. I would like to follow the queen's instructions. It is late at night and the road is quiet. I will give the queen a ride. Queen Zhen 11 nodded. She had never noticed that concubine Jiangshu had such a measured advance and retreat before. She turned to look at concubine Panda again and said, since concubine Panda is so anxious to serve concubine Yu, I can't stop her. Concubine Yu happens to be at this moment. If she feels dizzy, it would be better for concubine Pan to go in and take care of her. Concubine Pan almost vomited a mouthful of blood. Looking at the queen's refreshed appearance, it was obvious that concubine Yu was defeated. If she comes in at this time, will she be treated as a living target by concubine Yu and sprayed into a sieve? But even though she knew this, concubine Panda couldn't refuse. Who knew that she had shouted so emotionally and hoarse just now? If she backed down at this moment, she didn't know what the queen would have to say. Concubine Yu also didn't say anything. Nothing good can be left behind. I hereby obey the queen's instructions. Concubine Panda stiffened her body and bowed, almost forcing herself to enter the palace. Empress Zhen 11 felt really comfortable. She even walked with her head held high. She thought that Ji Hongliao would have entered the palace anyway, so she turned around and told her, since Ji Hongliao has entered the palace, he is going to the palace. It's best to have the emperor get a safe diagnosis in Yin Palace before leaving the palace. Ji Hongliao knew very well that the queen wanted to tell the emperor from his mouth that concubine Yu was simply pretending to be ill, so that the emperor could continue to punish the three princes by kneeling down in peace. But at the same time, the queen is also selling him a favor. Even if he has always been upright and selfless in the emperor's heart, he still has to do what he should do. Only when the emperor feels comfortable can he continue to have smooth sailing in the palace. I understand the queen's instructions, and I will resign after accepting the favor. Things will naturally be carried out. When Ji Hongliao left, he specifically knocked on the queen's face and saw that there was no worry, so he knew the situation in the palace may not be as serious as rumored. The prince will not fall, and the queen will not fall. Even if the prince does fall, I am afraid that the queen will still not fall. Concubine Jiangshu saw everything behind her and secretly sighed at the power of the empress. She calmly sold her to Ji Yuan as a favor and even sold concubine Yu and her army. It's really a good idea. Zhang Shifei was even more fortunate that she had taken refuge in time. Queen Zhengzi left with satisfaction, but the remaining concubine Yu was not so happy. Pretending to be sick was discovered, and the queen overpowered her. This feeling of holding back her anger has been going smoothly since she entered the palace. How could concubine Yu have ever tasted it when she got everything she wanted? Now that I have this taste in my mouth, I really can't bear to swallow it, and I feel disgusted if I don't. Naturally, concubine Panda became the outlet for concubine Yu to vent her anger. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want if you are the real third prince? That was the third prince's concubine, not even the queen mother. She was just asked to test the condition of the prince. She also bribed so many guards to accompany her. She really regarded herself as a fairy daughter descended to earth. Concubine Panda stood there with a shy face, letting Concubine Yu vent her anger, and she was already scolding her in her heart. If your son hadn't written to my niece and asked her to spy on the prince's condition, how could things have happened to this point? Not to mention that my niece bribed the guards of the palace to show off her power and obey Fan Kinjao's killing without blood. The way he eats people without spitting out their bones would make any prince or concubine tremble when he sees him. But thinking so in her heart, Concubine Panda didn't dare to say that. From the moment she sent her niece to the third prince, she followed the Pan family on the third prince's boat. If the boat capsized now, what benefits would she get? Anyway, you won't lose meat if you are scolded, so just scold. Concubine Yu scolded her for a long time before the anger in her heart calmed down. The anger was extinguished, and Concubine Yu finally calmed down. She looked at Concubine Panda and asked, "Have you done what the Imperial Palace asked you a few days ago?" Concubine Panda rolled her eyes and said, "That's natural. I don't dare to disobey what the Imperial Concubine has told me. Now many people in the harem know that there are bandits in Huaishang. I'm afraid this will happen in a few days. The wind will blow into the emperor's ears." The emperor was worried about the prince's affairs, and even if the ministers heard about the banditry on Huihe River, they would not dare to report it easily. In the final analysis, no one dares to let the emperor continue to worry about things without evidence. But if the concubines in the harem quietly spread this news to the emperor's ears, it would be different. Even if there is no evidence, given the emperor's concern for Huaishang, he will always be worried and suspicious, so he sends people to Huaishang to investigate. Concubine Yu originally planned to let the third prince successfully replace the prince in the name of going to Huaishang. It's just that there seems to be no time to continue gradually. I heard that you also have someone in front of the emperor. Please spread the news to the emperor as soon as possible. The sooner the emperor knows, the better. You don't have to worry about money. I can give you any amount of money. As long as you handle this matter well, I will definitely be rewarded a lot, Concubine Yu said and glanced at Aunt Ying beside her. Grandma Ying quickly opened the second layer drawer next to the bed and took out a stack of banknotes. Concubine Panda took the banknote and carefully put it into her arms, then hurriedly left Huihe Palace. Unexpectedly, as soon as Concubine Panda left, news came from the front of the palace that the third prince was in coma. When Concubine Yu heard the news, not only was she not worried at all, she was actually very angry. Look at Grandma Ying, she is becoming more and more pampered. She just knelt down for a long time before she fainted. Do you really think that the angry emperor can just give it to you? It might have been okay if the queen hadn't kicked her. But when she thought that the queen didn't know how to apply eye drops in front of the emperor, Concubine Yu was so angry that she wished she could go to the palace in person and press the third prince's neck to make him continue to kneel down. If you want to do great things, how can you do it without a willingness to go out of your way? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 468. Chapter 468. Don't I need to lose face? Mammy Ying carefully covered Concubine Yu with a quilt. Do you need me to find someone to go to the front of the palace to see His Highness? Concubine Yu gritted her teeth angrily. Since the queen has come forward, she will not easily let the emperor speak to exempt the third prince from the penalty of kneeling. At this time, the more miserable the third prince is, the more the emperor will feel sorry for him. There is no need to worry about him. If he can't even do this, if you can't bear the hardship, you will really become a waste. Seeing that Concubine Yu was bitten to death, Aunt Ying did not let go, and she did not dare to speak any more to persuade her. Just at this time, the outside the door reported that Yuning had agreed to come to see him. Concubine Yu knew that Yuning must be here for the third prince's affairs without even thinking about it. She thought that Yuning could not be of any help at this time, so she asked Aunt Ying to take care of him. Yuning, who was standing in the yard, was very anxious. but in the end she didn't even see concubine Yu's face. Yuning didn't give up, but she could only grit her teeth and leave. Now she has the emperor's promise that no matter how worried she is, she will never go to the front of the palace without permission. Her stomach sank for no reason, and Yuning lowered her eyes, her dark eyes full of disgust and hatred. All things considered, this child came at the wrong time. There was no movement on the Yuyu palace side, and similarly, there was no movement on the Yukian side. It was as if the third prince fainted had not happened at all. If Emperor Yongchang was still worried about concubine Yu who fell ill just now, then now he just wanted to throw concubine Yu into a bucket of cold water and take a dip. Emperor Yongchang liked the concubine's coquettishness, but there was also a time limit for such coquettishness. At this time, if you still want to deceive him by calling him sick, what do you think he is? In fact, when Emperor Yongchang heard that concubine Yu was ill, he had already guessed that it was concubine Yu's method. However, he knew it was one thing, but now that it came out of Ji Hongliao's mouth, it was another matter. Oh, everyone knows that you are pretending to be ill, and you want me to pardon the third prince for you. You can be shameless in front of me, but I also don't have to be shameless in front of everyone. Originally, Emperor Yongchang's anger had not subsided, and then he heard the news that the third prince had fainted from the front of the palace. Emperor Yongchang did not directly order someone to drag the third prince to kneel on the nail board, all because he was too partial to his son. The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. They all try to deceive by pretending to be sick. Keep kneeling. The entire palace did not cause any disturbance because of the third prince's fainting. The concubines in each palace were full of suspicion. After all, the third prince had been favored by the emperor since childhood. It was the third prince who was lying in the open space in front of the imperial court with a confused look on his face. In the past, coma was the most effective way to deal with his father, but why didn't it work now? Don't say that the emperor didn't send anyone over. In the blink of an eye, he was lying on the green bricks for a stick of incense. Even his mother and concubine didn't send anyone over to take a look. Bailey Rongs thought hard and couldn't figure out why his trick didn't work. But lying on the cold ground, he knew clearly that since he was pretending to be unconscious, he had to fight to the end. Even if no one came, he would never get up if he didn't lie on the ground for an hour. The palace seems to be very strict, but news spreads the fastest. Within 2 hours, all the princes outside the palace heard about it. It was rare for the princes to see the third prince cheating. They could be said to have stayed up all night laughing. Early the next morning, they all got on the carriages entering the palace, wanting to go to the palace to see the third prince's downcast appearance. As it turned out, the princes had just entered the palace when they heard that the emperor had summoned the third prince to the imperial study. No one knew what the emperor had said to the third prince. The princes, who had been pricking their ears, only knew that when the third prince came out of the imperial study, he had become the chief general who went to Huaishang to suppress the bandits. 2,000 elite soldiers went with the third prince. Speaking of the idea of taking advantage of one's crimes and making meritorious deeds, the princes all knew in their hearts that this was simply because their father had softened his heart again. What can the princes who woke up so early in the morning and didn't even make it to the meeting say? They can only go to their respective palaces and find their respective mothers. Concubine Jiangshu had just finished washing when she heard that the 8th prince was coming. With the help of the palace attendants, she went down to the front hall, and she saw the 8th prince sitting in a chair in a daze with an angry look on his face. I feel angry early in the morning. I'm afraid I'll be heartbroken all day long. I'm afraid I haven't had breakfast since I entered the palace so early. It just so happened that my mother-in-law had someone prepare your favorite 8 treasure lotus seed porridge yesterday. I originally planned to do it today. I'll have someone take it out for you, but it doesn't seem to be necessary now. Zhang Shifei walked over with a smile and ordered the palace servants around her to serve breakfast quickly. Soon, the food was put on the table. Even if concubine Jiangshu has been promoted to a concubine, in the final analysis she does not have a strong natal family. The people in the palace are always looking down upon others and serving food to others. Concubine Jiangshu has no support from her natal family, and she is not valued and favored by the emperor. In recent years, the food and drink expenses in the palace have been deducted and exploited. Even on this table now, there are just a few side dishes. The eighth prince looked at the 8 treasure lotus seed porridge in front of him without any appetite. I heard that my father asked the third emperor brother to lead the troops to Huaishang, saying that they would leave today. Concubine Jiangshu paused while serving the dishes. Your Majesty asked the third prince to go to Huaishang, which can be regarded as asking the third prince to make meritorious deeds. The eighth prince sneered, it sounds like you have meritorious deeds, but who doesn't know that Huaishang is a piece of fat that the father cherishes so much? Although I don't know why my father attaches so much importance to it, Huaishang was always under the supervision of the prince. Now he just gave it to the third emperor brother. Doesn't the mother concubine think that the father wants to reuse the third emperor brother? The third prince and the prince have been having constant disputes. Even if the emperor is partial, as long as the prince is safe, it is not that simple to re-establish the throne. You don't need to think too much. Now that the third prince has decided to go to Huaishang, you might as well take advantage of this. It's time to go to the palace in person to see the prince and let your father know that you are a person who values friendship. As Zhang Shifei spoke, she even lowered her voice and said, it's best to let the prince understand which side you are on. The eighth prince listened to his mother's words. Not only was he not happy, but he threw the spoon in his hand on the round table angrily. Does the mother want me to be a dog for the prince? Concubine Jiangshu frowned slightly when she heard this unpleasant adjective, but she still said patiently, the third prince and concubine you seem to be going smoothly, but the crown prince and the queen are not soft persimmons, especially the crown princess. An existence that cannot be underestimated. It is always a gamble, but I am more optimistic about the prince. Thinking about the scene of her private meeting with the crown princess that day, concubine Jiangshu was still very frightened. Looking at the concubines in this palace, they may not be as smart as the crown princess. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 469. Chapter 469, You have to pay the price if you feel distressed. The eighth prince laughed angrily, my mother-in-law is eager to let her son sit on that chair. My mother-in-law is so good. She asked me to be a dog for others before the outcome was determined. Is it true that my mother-in-law is so good? Do you look down on me like this? But my mother-in-law doesn't even think about it. How could I be helpless in this court if it weren't for your humble status? The grandmother who was following concubine Jiangshu heard these harsh words, but she didn't dare to say a word. In recent years, the eighth prince has been at odds with his empress, and it is not that he dislikes her status. But no matter how despicable the empress is, these words should not have come out of the mouth of the eighth prince. Concubine Jiangshu's face turned pale, and veins popped out on the back of her hand holding the handkerchief, but she still tried to persuade her with good words, both concubine you and the empress, their methods are extraordinary. You must not do anything stupid. Listen to my concubine's advice, instead of fighting alone, it is better to follow the prince. In this way, when the prince ascends the throne, her son will still be able to drink soup. The eighth prince didn't even bother to listen and walked away directly. Zhang Shifei looked at her son who didn't even look back, and she sat swaying on the chair in distress. Mammy hurried over to help me, Your Highness, the eighth prince, is always outspoken, but your majesty must take care of yourself. Concubine Jiangshu leaned on Mammy's shoulder and smiled bitterly, since he can remember, he has always looked down on me, a concubine who has been a slave. How can I not know that Mammy doesn't need to comfort me? What kind of identity do I have? I know it in my heart, I just hope that he can see the reality clearly and not be confused. Mammy also sighed helplessly. She also didn't understand why the eighth prince was so ambitious. The eighth prince never thought that his heart was higher than the sky. He never had a chance to stand out. It was not because he had a lowly mother-in-law who had been a slave. Since childhood, none of the brothers around him looked down upon him. If he didn't rely on if you only fight for yourself, then you will really have no money and no energy. Coming out of concubine Jiangshu's palace angrily, the eighth prince originally wanted to leave the palace directly. As a result, as soon as I reached the palace gate, I heard that the eldest prince had personally asked to see his father, and wanted to go to the palace to visit the prince. The other princes who had heard the news had all followed them to the imperial study room. Even if they could not get such a lucrative job as going to Huaishang, they would have a good reputation in front of their father for being affectionate, righteous, and caring for their brothers and sisters. It is always better than returning empty-handed. Once the eighth prince heard that all the princes were now in the imperial study room, he had no choice but to leave the palace even if he wanted to. He could only accept his fate and walked in the direction of the imperial study room. Emperor Yongchang was thinking about Huaishang and had no time to deal with the princes kneeling in front of him. He immediately allowed them to go to the palace so that he could be clean and tidy. At once, all the princes set off for the palace. It was the princes and concubines who heard at the palace that the princes were about to arrive at the palace. They were really thankful. They are all bored to death in this palace, and finally they have someone to talk to. As soon as the sixth princess Han Jingchen learned the news, she had someone send the news to Fan Qinjiao. Now that the prince is seriously ill, it is difficult for her to meet Fan Qinjiao, but the news that should be conveyed still needs to be conveyed. In the palace where the prince lived, Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming had lunch together. There was Lin Yi and someone guarding the door, but he was not afraid of anyone breaking in. Furthermore, the incident involving the third prince and his concubine caused a serious commotion last time, and now the prince's palace is like a scourge in everyone's eyes. Everyone avoids it, for fear that something will happen to the prince when they visit. With cucumber and tofu, there was rare peace in the palace for a while. The news about Han Jingchen was sent in by Lin Yi. After hearing this, Fan Qinjiao looked at the man opposite in silence. It is reasonable for the princes to take the opportunity to increase their presence. If they haven't eaten the meat, why don't they allow them to drink soup? Faced with the emperor abandoning Bailey Fengming so quickly, Fan Qinjiao felt somewhat resentful, even though she knew that it was not unusual for that selfish man to do such a thing. But for Bailey Fengming, he was his father after all. Bailey Fengming picked up some fresh bamboo shoots and put them into Fan Qinjiao's plate. Have a taste. I heard they were picked freshly by people in the palace. Fan Qinjiao took a bite, and it was indeed crisp and delicious. After just a few bites, she no longer had any appetite. When Bailey Fengming saw Fan Qinjiao put down his bowl and chopsticks, he smiled and said, "Why worry about things you know well? I was just wondering if you were ready to face this outcome when you forced the emperor." Fan Qinjiao asked softly. The serious illness seemed to have given Bailey Rongs a punch. In fact, it also pushed the emperor, who had been hesitant, to make a decision. I'm afraid Bailey Fengming has already figured it out, and Bailey Rongs will take the opportunity to inflame the Huaishang banditry in front of the emperor, so that the emperor has to make a choice. Fan Qinjiao understood that everything was planned by Bailey Fengming. But facing the complete abandonment of their father, how many people can really bear it with peace of mind? Bailey Fengming said calmly, "That's the truth, what's the use of minding it?" Fan Qinjiao felt a pain in his heart when he saw him looking so calm, so he stood up and sat next to him. The face in front of her was gentle and elegant, and the smile hanging from her eyes was like the spring breeze in March, but she knew that if she said she was not sad, it would be a lie. If he really didn't care at all, he would not have hated the emperor for so many years. Hate is often based on love. Bailey Fengming reached out and tapped the tip of Fan Qingjiao's nose, and chuckled, "It's not like you to be so indecisive. Fan Qingjiao, I feel sorry for you and you are making fun of me. Is it really appropriate?" Bailey Fengming saw the curse in her heart and laughed dumbly. He put his arms around her slender waist and brought her close to his chest. The warm breath gradually came closer to her face, and the quiet purple fragrance spread over her face. Soft lips fell on hers, pressing them gently for a moment before tossing and turning reluctantly. His unique breath melted between her lips and teeth and lingered for a long time. I don't know how long it took before her lips were freed, but her person had already fallen into the warm and beating embrace in front of her. In my ears, a low laughter came, the pleasant voice was hoarse with a hint of throbbing. "Since you are heartbroken, you always have to come up with something to compensate. This is just right. Fan Qingjiao. This person really doesn't know what restraint is until he's beaten up." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 470. Chapter 470. The sixth prince accepts a concubine. As the third prince set out for Huaishang, Bailey Fengming also arranged for someone to send the news to Huaishang. 2 days later, other princes arrived at the palace one after another. Even though the princes knew in their hearts that they would not see the prince, they still came to the palace for a formality. As the crown princess, Fan Qingjiao naturally had to receive her in person when the emperor and the queen were not present. But after all, there are differences between men and women. After a brief greeting, the princes stood up and left one after another. Even the fifth prince Bailey Lingyu, who had always been familiar with him, could only leave with everyone for the time being. Only the sixth prince sat on the chair with no intention of leaving. Hindering the relationship with Han Jingchen, Fan Qingjiao was very polite to the sixth prince. "Does His Highness the sixth prince have other matters?" It was the sixth prince who was wandering in the sky and was startled when he heard Fan Qingjiao's voice, and almost jumped up from his chair. Fan Qingjiao curled his lips helplessly. "Does His Highness the sixth prince have something on his mind?" Sixth prince just nodded weakly. Fan Qingjiao was really helpless. She knew that the sixth prince was soft-tempered, but she never expected him to be so soft. She also didn't know how Han Jingchen got along with the sixth prince on weekdays. But now that people are sitting here and not leaving, can she just kick them out? Naturally it is impossible. So Fan Qingjiao could only continue to ask patiently, "If His Highness the sixth prince believes in me, why not come and listen?" The sixth prince said that he believed in the crown princess, but he thought that the crown princess had a good relationship with his own crown princess. So he asked bravely, "I just want to ask, if, for example, the sixth prince, how will the concubine react when she knows there will be a new person in the house?" Fan Qingjiao was startled. "Your Highness, the sixth Highness, wants to have a concubine." The sixth prince was even more surprised than Fan Qingjiao. How did the crown princess know? Fan Qingjiao, if there is no conclusive evidence, why are you just making metaphors in front of me? The sixth prince was in pain, and his facial features were all screwed together. "Actually, it's not what I thought, it was arranged by the family. The crown princess also knows that I have not had the support of my mother and concubine since I was a child. Now I finally recognized it in the name of a wedding. My mother's family is said to be a close family, but in reality they are dependent on each other. Now that my mother's family wants to arrange a marriage for me, if I refuse, my mother's family will be in panic and heartbroken. Damn it, I feel panicked and chills down my spine." The sincerity of what he said was that Fan Qingjiao never expected that the sixth prince, who had always been unknown, could see things so thoroughly. If this matter were placed on others, Fan Qingjiao might choose to sit back and watch. But when it comes to Han Jingchen, Fan Kinjao will not ignore things. I wonder which family the sixth prince is from. I didn't ask. Fan Kinjao. You are so generous even if you don't know who you want to marry. It was probably because Fan Kinjao's disgusted look was too obvious, so the sixth prince explained in a low voice, I had no idea when my mother's family said they wanted to marry me a concubine, but my mother's family said that this concubine is those who could help me, also talked about a lot of benefits, but I didn't listen carefully at the time. It is reasonable for the Zhou family to consider the sixth prince. Fan Kinjao looked at the embarrassment on the face of the sixth prince and was not half happy, and he felt relieved. Let me choose a time to talk to the sixth prince about this matter, although there is no guarantee that the sixth prince will really accept it with peace of mind, but it is always better than His Highness the sixth prince telling the sixth princess himself. The sixth prince nodded fiercely and looked at Fan Kinjao as if he had seen a savior, his eyes glowing green. Don't worry, princess, even if you want me to say it, I don't know what to say. Fan Kinjao nodded again and personally sent the sixth prince out. Standing on the steps, watching the retreating figure of the sixth prince, Fan Qingyuan remained silent for a long time. In Ziliang, the emperor has 3,000 beauties in his harem, not to mention these princes who were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. Looking at the high-end mansions in the main city, there are not many wives and concubines in groups. As a head wife, no matter how uncomfortable she feels, she must let other women in with her husband with a smile. If she fails to do so, she will have committed the sin of 7 departures. She must either choose to leave her husband's house voluntarily as she did in the past, or she must leave her husband's house, waiting to be divorced from home by her husband. Fan Kinjao doesn't feel that Han Jingchen needs to pity her, because she knows that the Han Jingchen of today is who she will be in the future. Once Bailey Fengming really sat on that chair, how could the harem stop at the beginning of the new emperor's accession to the throne? In fact, even Fan Kinjao himself doesn't know what he will do when that time comes. You can only take one step at a time. The arrival of the princes made the palace, which had been quiet for a long time, become completely lively. The princes and concubines were all recently married, and they were all overjoyed to see their own prince. Every day, the princes would get up early and come to the palace to visit the prince. Although Fan Kinjao blocked the door every time, the princes complained, but the last time the 3 princes and concubines broke into the palace with their guards made too much noise, and the prince, even if they feel uncomfortable, they don't dare to be really tough. If the prince has another cucumber and tofu person, what good will they do? Fan Kinjao has been waiting for Han Jingchen to come to the house, but Han Jingchen never came. Even the sixth prince was detained in Zhuangzi by Han Jingchen. Fan Kinjao didn't know that Han Jingchen didn't want to join the others and cause trouble for her. But just like that, Fan Kinjao had to hide the matter of the sixth prince's concubine in his stomach for the time being. The imperial doctors would come to take Bailey Fengming's pulse every day, while Fan Kinjao calculated the time and gradually alleviated Bailey Fengming's condition, although there was no need for Bailey Fengming to wake up to face everyone yet. But at least there is no need to make everyone fearful like before. Bailey Fengming's daily pulse will also be transmitted to the main city, but there has been no movement from the emperor's side. The princes living in the palace were also unsure of their father's thoughts, so they stayed in Zhuangzi for the time being and did not dare to return to the main city rashly. The days were getting warmer, so Fan Kinjao simply ordered someone to move the stove for cooking medicine to the yard. At noon, Fan Kinjao was sitting in the yard cooking soup when he saw a young palace maid running over in a hurry and stopped 3 meters away from Fan Kinjao, but hesitated to speak. Fan Kinjao raised his head and asked, "What happened?" The little palace maid trembled all over and shivered for a long time before she knelt on the ground and said, Princess, the 4th young lady of the Hua family was beaten by the 2nd young lady of the Zhang family." Fan Kinjao was stunned. Lin Yi, who was standing in the yard, was also stunned. If it weren't for his identity, Lin Yi really wanted to confirm it himself. Who was beaten? The fourth lady of the Hua family. That's the crown princess's sister. How could the second young lady of the Zhang family have the courage to touch the crown princess? End of this chapter.